Hi, in this lecture you will learn how to use the explicit cursors. Now we know that cursors are pointers to the current row in the active set. With explicit cursors, we can iterate on the current set of rows one by one. But be aware that we use cursors with multiple row queries. Actually, we can use with a single row result, but it is nonsense. Sometimes it becomes hard to understand the cursors. I think the best way to understand that is by seeing on examples. So let's see how we create the cursors and then continue with the examples. The first thing that we will do for a cursor is declaring it. We declare it with its select query. With doing that, we allocate some area in the memory for the result set. Then we open our cursor. When we do that, our execution plan is calculated and the data is stored in the memory. We talked about that in the previous lecture. Then we fetch a row. Fetch command returns the current row from the active set of rows. With fetching, we have one row data now. When we fetch a row, the cursor pointer automatically points to the next row in the memory. So the next fetch will return the next row. We will see that. There are some methods to check if we have finished iterating on the cursor. This is generally needed when we loop, but sometimes we may check if the cursor is alive, etc. We will see all the cursor functions. Then we close our cursor. We need that when we want to open a cursor with different variables or etc. We will see that. But if you do not close the cursor, it is automatically closed, means killed by the database server when your block finishes. But I recommend you to close when you're done with that. In a large amount of code, if you do not close the cursor, you may have logical errors like inappropriate data. And for the memory, closing cursors will be wise to free up some more space for the system. When we close a cursor, we can open up again and use. But if there are some changes in the result set of the cursor select query, the new result set will be on the memory. I mean, if one row is deleted from the database after the first open, you will see one less row in the next open cursor. Now, let's see how we use cursors in a PL/SQL code. First, we need to declare a cursor. We do that with writing cursor keyword. Then the name we want to specify, then is keyword and the select query. Any valid select query can be used in here. I mean, if you can select a query alone, you can use it in here. But notice, no into clause in here. We do into operation in our fetch. This is the declaration of the cursors in BASIC. After the declaration, inside begin end block, we open the cursor with texting open keyword and the cursor name that we specified in the declaration. When this code is executed, the algorithm of cursors work. That means a dynamic memory allocation happens, our query is parsed, bind variables are arranged, the active set is calculated, and a block of code is retrieved into the memory. This data is called as active result set. Actually, some people call cursors as current set of rows. So our cursor points to the active set now. Now we can fetch it. We write fetch keyword, then our cursor name, then into clause. After the into clause, we can use variables or records, etc. With this code, we fetch the first row into our variables or records. Now we can use this data. We can modify that variable and make some updates, etc. Whatever we need. But be sure that the variables must be at the same data type and the same order with the select query of the cursor. We can write as many fetches as we wish in here as far as we have a new row in our cursor. Or we can use a loop and write only one fetch. We will make examples about that. When we finish with the cursor, we close it with writing close keyword in our cursor name. If we do not close the cursor, we may have problems on that, because there is a maximum limit for the open cursors. If it exceeds that limit, it will prevent opening a new cursor. So do not forget to close the cursor when you finish with it. Besides, if you try to fetch from a cursor that is closed, you will have invalid cursor exception. We can check the status of the cursor too. We will see that. Now let's make an example and see how it works. Declare. Now we will declare our cursor first. Cursor c_amp is select, let's say first name, last name, from employees. Our cursor can have any valid select queries. Most of the times you will write your select query right at the time of cursor declaration. So you may wonder if it is a valid query or not. To check that, we can use SQL developers run selected query opportunity. I mean, we can select the query and click run. Let me show you. We can select here and click on run. As we can see, we checked if our query works fine or not. Great. Now let's declare our variables to fetch our row into them. V first name employees dot first name person type. Let me copy that. This is the last name. We last name. Then we write our begin keyword. Now we need to open our cursor. I simply write open and our cursor name. Now we have the data in our memory. We can fetch that data into our variables. Let's see how to do that. We write fetch c_amps into v first name and v last name. Now let's print the variables to check if we could fetch the row. bbms output dot put line. Let's say v first name. Let me copy that. A space between first name and last name and v last name. Now we will close the cursor. Close c_amps. And great. Now let's run it. As you can see, we fetch the data using the cursor. Now let me show you something more. We said that when the cursor fetches a row, the pointer goes to the next row of the active set. So let's make another fetch and see what happens. Let's copy paste our fetched and dbms output. Now let's run it. As we can see, the next fetch returned the next row. Now let's run our code again to see if the values change. As we can see, if we run the whole block again, we get the same result. Why? Because we fetched for several times. Yes, we fetched, but when we run our query again, our cursor is declared and opened again. So the previous fetches are gone because we have a completely new cursor now. Do not confuse about that. But before finishing our block or before closing our cursor, every fetch will return the next row. Now let's make some more fetches and see what happens. Copy and paste 2 times. Now let's run it. As we can see, our values has changed because before printing we fetched for more than one time, and in every fetch we assigned the next value into our variables. Now we said that we can have any valid SQL queries inside of cursor select query. So let's see that. First name, last name, and the department name from employees join with departments using the department ID. And our where clause where department ID is between, let's say, 30 and 60. And a new variable, we department name departments dot department name person type. Now let's change our fetches. Actually, one fetch will be enough. V last name and V department name. And let's change our DBMS output. In the department of V department name. Now let's run it. As we can see, no problem. Any valid select query can be used with cursors. I think this is enough for this lecture. There are many uses of cursors. I will explain them in detail in the next lectures. So this is the end of this lesson. See you in the next lectures.